You're live.
All right. Okay, guys, welcome to the Special Identity Politics live stream. I'm Kevin DeAnna. Now, tonight we're going to be talking about the insurrection in Minnesota, and I don't think insurrection is too strong a word. Yesterday, I told you about how the Department of Homeland Security is sending about 2,000 agents to round up illegals and investigate fraud claims in what was once the North Star State, now basically snowy Somalia, after at least $9 billion has been stolen from American taxpayers. Now, of course, it is because these people are illegally present, because they are parasitic, because they are a liability, because they are criminals, because they are hostile, because they are clannish, because they are all these negative things, because they are making the lives of ordinary Americans worse. That's why they need to be defended in the eyes of progressives. First rule of majority-minority relations, as Lawrence Oster put it, the worse a non-white group behaves, the more they need to be defended, the more racist the white majority is for noticing. Now, yesterday, Renee Nicole Good was shot and killed by ICE after she decided she could just drive her vehicle up to ICE agents to interfere with what they're doing and then essentially try to drive away or drive over one of the ICE agents. Now, here's the video. Before I play it real quick, leave aside that the defense here is that, oh, she was leaving. Apparently, if the police, federal law enforcement tell you to stay put, you don't have to listen to them. You can just leave if you feel like it. Perfectly acceptable to flee from law enforcement after initiating a confrontation. Anyway, here's the video. Slow motion, no sound. We're just going to play it here real quick. So, here it's going. Now, as you can see with this, there are two officers here. There's one guy in front of the vehicle, and you can see that he doesn't draw his weapon until she hits the gas, which means that from this guy's point of view, he's looking at this car. All of a sudden, she steps on the gas. He's in front of the car. He pulls out his weapon and he fires. I mean, as far as I can tell, that's incredible restraint. She decides to go with the agent in front of the car. Perfectly fine. Tagged and bagged. Now, ask yourself, what would happen if you tried to do that? Has anybody ever been pulled over before? I have. What happens if an officer is next to you and you say, you know what, I just feel like fleeing? What could go wrong? What happens if there are two officers there and somebody's in front of your car and you step on the gas? What do you think is going to happen to you? Why was she there to begin with? Good question. Amid reports that she was a legal observer, which are these people from the National Lawyers Guild and other such organizations that basically just try to get the illegals off, we get this report from the New York Post, and I quote, a blood-covered woman who identified herself as the wife of Renee Nicole Good hysterically blamed herself for her partner's killing at the hands of ICE agents. Gut-wrenching footage shows. The woman was filmed distraught and sobbing just steps from Good's wrecked car in Minneapolis Wednesday morning. As a neighbor who heard the commotion asked her what happened. I made her come down here. It's my fault, the woman said through sobs. They just shot my wife. They shot her in the head. I have a 6-year-old in school, she appeared to say. Good was shot dead while behind the wheel in an encounter with ICE agents. An agent who was clipped by her car drew a handgun and fired 3 shots at close range, killing Good and causing her vehicle to speed out of control and crash down the block, unquote. But here's the thing. I will defend her a little bit because a lot of people are saying, well, you know, it's not her fault for this, that. It's not really her fault, but not in the way people are talking about it. Since President Trump got elected, since 2016, really since before, you have this endless media campaign, academia, movies, TV shows, video games. What are they constantly telling us? Everything is authoritarianism. Everything is fascism. Everything is Nazism. They're in control right now. They've been in control for 50 years. You're living under it. What do you expect people to do? How do you expect people to react when you set up something and say, this is the most evil system that could possibly imagine, and you're living under it right now? And by the way, here are all these movies and games and everything else where there are superheroes with plot armor who can fight and take them down. What do you think that's going to do to mentally unstable people, to suggestible people, to the kind of people who are going to listen to someone saying, hey, let's go to this protest. Let's stand in the way of fascism. Let's stop ICE. Think of the absurdity of a woman just throwing herself in front of law enforcement, ignoring the guns, ignoring the warnings, ignoring the fact that she's driving a car in snowy, icy conditions, inherently dangerous to her and everyone else. Doesn't matter. I'm fighting fascism. I'm the resistance. And after all, what were the Nazis best known for? their strict immigration policy. But critically, at the same time, she believed, probably until the moment the bullet went through her head, nothing can actually happen to me. I'm a woman. I'm a good person. You're not allowed to do anything to me. I can be aggressive. I can interfere in your operations. I can drive a car around. I can apparently hit you with it. I mean, she clipped the officer. That's kind of a big deal, but I can't be held accountable. No consequences can come to me, because if there are consequences that come to me and I'm a heckin' good person, that's fascism. Similarly, if there are laws I don't like, they don't apply. They're not real laws. They're not real cops. They apply to you, but you're not a good person like I am. But here's the problem. These people are learning you're not Katniss Everdeen. You don't have plot armor. You're a person. You're meat and bone. Bullets and cars and things like that can, in fact, kill you. You don't like spin kick out of the way and throw a fireball and defeat Adolf Hitler 2.0. It doesn't work that way. But they think the rules don't apply to them, not even the rules of life and death. And why should they? Every media outlet is telling them that the rules don't apply to tens of millions of people in this country illegally. Why should the law or police instructions apply to liberals? Heckin' good people. And think of where we are. Think of where Minneapolis was in 2020. This is where George Floyd happened. This is where an entire precinct station was burned to the ground, which at the time, all these reporters and celebrities and all the rest of these types, they either soft pedaled it or they openly said, this is a good thing. And did people wake up? Did it accelerate? Did people go, like it's beginning? Did you get this law and order backlash? Did you get this right-wing reaction? Did rising crime or disorder lead to a conservative sweep? No. People doubled down. Nobody learned anything. This is a quote from the time. Good citizens burning down the evil police precinct in Minnesota after all police were out and safe. All police should go home. No violence, please. Police headquarters must be demolished by the city tomorrow as a show of contrition to Black America. Rebuild PD with decent, kind people, aka people of color. That's what Michael Moore said at the time. That was like typical shitlib opinion. Now, of course, what's the narrative with this situation? ICE isn't real law enforcement. Well, we saw how they treated real law enforcement back in 2020, so we don't need to consider this seriously. But think of how they're talking about this now. ICE is not real law enforcement. You don't actually have to obey them. It's just been specifically claimed by Democrats in Congress and on cable news. We need to get rid of ICE. It's a rogue agency. We need to get rid of it. It's not actually illegal to be an illegal immigrant. It's not actually a crime. It's a mere civic offense. Immigration laws don't actually apply. We don't actually have to listen to them. Even though we're standing up for the rule of law and against authoritarianism and for the judges, and Donald Trump is a threat to that rule of law in our democracy, the law isn't actually the law. And actually, my feelings and opinions are what the real law is about. And my favorite, and you see this floating around everywhere yesterday, is that the woman is justified in trying to drive away because there were masked men approaching her car. How could she know who these masked men were? They didn't have ID. Well, she was there to disrupt the operations. She drove a long way to be there. They knew what they were doing. But we're told, she didn't know who they were. She didn't know they were ICE agents. They might have been kidnappers from the cartel. It's like a TV show. It was self-defense. She had absolutely no idea. Of course, how this meshes with her also being a legal observer and being pressured from her wife, telling her to do this and following these people around to go up to force a confrontation. Who knows? And, she was trying to escape. That excuses everything. Drove to this area where ICE was, blocked the road with her car, prevented the convoy from leaving. Her wife, shall we say, is taping this. Somehow she knows where ICE is going to be. We'll come back to that. She hits the gas while the guy's in front of her, clips the dude, and the excuse is she's trying to leave. Now, again, I've been pulled over before. You've been pulled over before. Sometimes you get a ticket. Sometimes you get a warning. Sometimes nothing happens. But I do know this. A lot of different ways such an encounter can go. But there's no scenario where an officer comes up to your window and you just get to slam on the gas and speed away. And there's definitely no scenario where there's a cop in front of you where you get to slam on the gas, clip him, and you don't get lit up. What are we doing here? And if you do speed away and you somehow get away with it, they're going to chase you. And they're not just going to say, well, you were scared. Here you go. You're a good person. Have some Reddit upvotes or whatever the hell these people do. I mean, again, it's that millennial woes quote, right? It's amazing how much leftist discourse is just them pretending not to understand things, thus making discourse impossible. Obstruct law enforcement, ignore commands, accelerate while facing an agent, hit them with your fucking car, and then nope, did nothing wrong. But they think they can do this. Why? And this is what's really at stake here. They have gassed themselves up to the point where they think immigration laws are automatically illegitimate. And furthermore, if you enforce those laws, if you are a part of ICE, if you even support these laws, if you voted for Donald Trump, say, or if you didn't vote for Donald Trump because you didn't think he was hard enough on immigration, this makes you a fascist. Because after all, what is fascism except a strict immigration policy? And this means you should be killed. Go to Reddit right now. What are the kind of comments that you're going to get? This is what the Second Amendment is for. The first shots have been fired. We need to respond to deadly force. This is everywhere. This is mainstream social media. And of course, it only goes one way. We've all been on the receiving end of this, right? I mean, what did they use to justify censorship a few years ago? Stochastic terrorism. That was the term they used in the New York Times, stochastic terrorism. This is what they said. We can't even cover Donald Trump's press conferences anymore, even when he was president of the United States. Why? Because he's saying things. And maybe they're not directly calling for violence, but he's hinting at it. He's kind of dancing around the edges. Some of his more militant followers might like take things too far. So it's really dangerous. And therefore, it's not allowed. We really can't cover this kind of stuff. It would be irresponsible to give this a platform, even if he's the president. But mainstream social media calling for assassinations and violent attacks on law enforcement, perfectly fine. Oh, well, ICE isn't real law enforcement, though. Well, Donald Trump didn't invent ICE. He didn't invent the Border Patrol. He didn't invent the Department of Homeland Security. These things have been around for a while. And I think there's a pretty good case that as far as the Border Patrol goes, that should be like the only thing the federal government has. That should definitely be the largest armed force the federal government has. I mean, as satisfying as the operation in Venezuela was for a lot of us, none of that really defends my interests the same way as preventing infinity Somalians from moving into my neighborhood does. Like, I'd much rather have a border patrol that's the strongest military in the world doing that job. That's what the federal government is for. Now, of course, you could say, oh, this is illegitimate because I have this twisted moral worldview where if you don't think that something should exist, you can just wish it out of existence. I don't actually have to obey ICE. I don't think they should exist. You have leading Democrats saying this. You have Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer saying ICE should not be patrolling our streets because, you know, Chuck Schumer comes from the streets, right? And he says, oh, they're causing chaos. They're causing all these problems. Well, who is actually causing the chaos? Chuck Schumer and many of these other Democrats have moved to the position that they don't want ICE to exist, are the exact same people who have been in the position to write immigration laws for a very long time. Chuck Schumer especially has been in power for a very long time. At any given point, when you had a Democratic president, when you had a Democratic Congress, they could have abolished whatever immigration laws they wanted. Did they abolish any of these laws? Did they abolish ICE? Did they abolish the Border Patrol? Did they abolish border security? No, they didn't do any of these things. In fact, usually they strengthened these things. Usually they gave these institutions more money. What did they say? What have they been saying to us for decades now? Of course we want to secure the border. Of course, nobody really believes in open borders. We're all on the same team. Of course, we need to provide more funding to border security. Of course, we don't want a chaotic system. Of course, we only want amnesty to fix our broken system. The amnesty is just to make it all work. We don't want to abolish the rule of law. We're going to give more money to DHS. We're going to give more money to ICE. We're going to give more money to the Border Patrol. We're going to give more money to all these different things. You can trust us this time. The American people want us to get this right. And we know we've let you down in the past, but this time is going to work. Well, what actually happened, guys? I mean, this was going on for decades under Republicans and Democrats, by the way. We all remember what George W. Bush was trying to do. What happened when Trump came in this time? Basically halted illegal immigration without passing amnesty, critically, within like a week of taking office. It was that simple. Just a question of will. Now, you can argue, what the hell were they doing in the first term, right? But they did do it this time. Like, it's done. That problem is basically over. So along with that, we no longer ever have to listen to the claim, well, you need amnesty to secure the border. No, you fucking don't. It's done. It's that simple. And we always knew it would be that simple. It's another example of the fix everything switch. But we still have all these illegals in the country, and we still have all these laws on the books. Things like you aren't allowed to be a public charge, for example, or a danger to public health. All these restrictions on immigrants that in theory should allow us to get rid of these people right away, that Congress passed, that they voted on. The way our democracy is supposed to work, right? The schoolhouse rock bullshit about the Constitution and whatever else. These people voted for it. What happens? Well, you aren't actually allowed to enforce those laws. I voted for it, but you can't do anything about it. That's not allowed. Because how does law actually work? Turns out, actually, Hispanics are actually American Indians, so they get a racial exemption to immigration laws. That's what Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says, and she may end up the Democratic nominee and maybe the next president. Well, you can't deport the Somalis. It's America's fault that Somalia is so bad. And Minnesota wouldn't be anything without Somalia. Boston wouldn't be anything without Somalis. I mean, Boston's mayor said that. Boston, of course, has no history until Somali immigration. Maine, same thing. America went to give these people food under the Clinton administration. It went sideways. Therefore, somehow it's your fault. You need to pay for it. You can't get rid of temporary protected status for Somalis, or for that matter, Hondurans or Afghans or anybody else. Why? Because some non-white judge says that temporary actually means forever, because those countries are poor. Sending them back would be mean. So once they come into the country, you can't send them back for any reason. And any president can unilaterally just abandon immigration law. You don't actually have to enforce the laws passed by Congress. Somehow that's not a betrayal of the Constitution. Somehow that's not an abuse of executive power, but it is an abuse of power to enforce the actual laws passed by Congress. That's where we're at. And it sounds crazy, and I feel like a crazy person saying this, but this is actually the situation. And it gets worse because when you look at the voter registration laws in states like Minnesota, when you look at how elections have been in a lot of these states, and it's not even controversial to say that basically at least one Senate race in that state was basically fraudulent when Al Franken beat Norm Coleman by like a few hundred votes. It turns out most of the elections in these states and localities are determined by these non-white voting blocks. Are these votes even legitimate? Probably not. If you look at the voter registration laws, there's no chain of evidence, shall we say. There's no chain of possession for these ballots. If you wanted to do fraud, it would be very easy to do. And it's pretty amazing that once you implement these voter ID laws and implement these strict controls, suddenly the Democrats don't win that many elections. And furthermore, all these groups are getting all this taxpayer money for nothing. I mean, the DOJ is apparently looking into Tim Walz right now because of allegations of fraud. And we're talking like $9-10 billion in Minnesota just for the one program, $70 billion of waste in California, probably hundreds of billions of waste more there. And God knows what's going on in terms of federal programs and all these other things. And everything from the election results to the entire welfare state could just be fraud, could just be buying votes. And not even just the open buying votes that we all know about in terms of like Snap EBT and things like that. We all know that's like how democracy works. But actually fraudulent things where you're giving people money to run businesses that don't actually exist. Billions of dollars. This is why they can have a house, they can have a car, they can have a small business, but you can't because you're paying for it. And then these people have the gall to tell us, well, you can't compete. Don't you believe in meritocracy? Don't you understand we're doing the jobs you can't? No, we're subsidizing our own dispossession. This is where we're at. But if we complain about it, how dare you question our free and fair elections? How dare you make certain groups feel bad? So what if 90% of the Somalis are on some welfare fraud? 10% aren't. You can't really talk about it. What we really need to talk about is white men. Tim Walz said white men commit most of the crime. Representative Emily Rendell, Democrat out of Washington, said just the other day, white men are committing disproportionate rates of violence in this country. There is no reason to believe that. There is no statistic that says that. This is an insane thing to claim. This is a member of Congress saying this. Not one person called her out. Not one person said that is complete bullshit. Not one person said, what are you basing this on? What entitles you to make this claim? Did you just invent this? Is this just your insane fantasy? But it doesn't matter. And every reporter and every academic and every reputable authority sits there and nods sagely and goes, yes, the white men. Under the Biden administration, you had the Democrats in Congress push for a congressional resolution that said belief in the Great Replacement, which at this point is a fact, not a theory, was itself belief in a terroristic ideology, that it was inherently an impetus to violence. You think they're not going to go back to that right away? Like whatever restraint the Trump administration uses right now is not going to be reciprocated by the Democrats if and when they get back in. And it's not just going to be that they open the borders. It's not just that we get unlimited Somalians and Haitians and God knows what else. It's not just that the numbers will no longer be there, that on a national scale, political victory will be impossible in a two-party system. It's not that just that you have a one-party system basically forever. It's that you're going to get a massive political crackdown. And even if you don't think that we're going to vote our way out of this, or at least not just vote our way out of this. Even these other solutions, whether it be secession, whether it be parallel institutions, whether it be a lot of things that we can't talk about, these things are all going to be impossible if you get this kind of crackdown, because here's the sad reality, people. Political repression usually works. When systems fail, it's a failure of will and competence. And say what you will about the American left, they're not lacking for will. And for those of us who lived through the last few years, I don't think they're lacking for competence either. America has a lot of problems. The key institutions of the state can still get things done when they want to. The number of opponents we face, I mean, this should have been brought home after Charlie Kirk. The amount of people who want you dead, of ordinary people who you encounter every single day, should terrify you. J.D. Vance said this today, and I agree with him. Yeah, it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy that this woman was killed, but it was a tragedy of her own making. Was she just a mother who wandered into this or whatever else? No, she was a political organizer. Her being a political organizer was more important to her than her being with her kids. The New York Post reports Renee Nicole Good, the mom who was killed by a federal agent after veering her car toward him, was part of an anti-ICE warrior, and was part of a group of activists who worked to document and resist, unquote, the federal immigration crackdown in Minnesota, the Post can reveal. Good, who moved to the city last year, linked up with the anti-ICE activists through her 6-year-old son's woke charter school, which we're probably paying for too, which boasts that it puts social justice first and involving kids in political and social activism, multiple local sources said. She was a warrior. She died doing what was right. A mother named Lisa, whose child attends the same school, told the Post at a growing vigil where Good was killed Wednesday. Good and her wife, Rebecca, 40, who were raising the child together and sent the boy to Southside Family Charter School, a K-5 academy opened in 1972, which has since its inception been unabashedly dedicated to social justice education, according to co-founder Susie Oppenheim. It was through her involvement in the school community that Good became involved in ICE Watch, a loose coalition of activists, yeah, we'll see about that, dedicated to disrupting ICE raids in the sanctuary city. Similar coalitions have cropped up all over the country, with activists using phone apps, whistles, and car horns to warn neighborhoods when ICE shows up. ICE Watch activists can also turn confrontational, with numerous instances of activists ramming agents with their cars in the past, unquote. And though it wasn't mentioned in this article, there have been about 100 incidents of people ramming ICE agents so far. We saw this in Chicago. We saw this in Los Angeles. We saw this in a lot of different places. You can find the videos there. They're not hard to find. And of course, well, they're ramming the agents, but they're not really ramming the agents. They're trying to escape, and you're allowed to do that, whatever you want. Oh, okay. Well, this may be a little insensitive, but some of us remember Charlottesville. Now, what happened there? James Fields, the guy who was driving the car, who hit those people, was sent to jail for, I think, 419 years. In a trial that had a lot of weird things going on. Now, legally, of course, I have to say that he deliberately rammed those people and caused the death of Heather Heyer, but there were a lot of weird things about the case. He plugged in the GPS how he wanted to get home. You had Antifa admitting and bragging about pointing guns at him earlier in the day. Heather Heyer's mom said something about her dying of a heart attack. He wasn't allowed to use the lawyer he wanted. There's all these weird things. Now, does any of this matter? No, of course not. You remember what the political climate was around that incident, the optical disaster. There's no defense in the world that could have made a difference. Even if you could somehow prove that he was just trying to get away, he still would have gotten more than 4 centuries in prison. Same thing with Derek Chauvin and his fellow officers in the George Floyd case. Laws downstream of identity and media power and political power. We know this. We're grown-ups. But critical thing about Charlottesville, and you remember the debate at the time, the thing that's relevant now, no one, absolutely no one said, you know what? It's not a big deal if a car just clips some people. It's not a big deal if somebody hits some people with a car, but he was trying to escape or claims he was trying to escape. Why don't we just let him go? It's not a big deal. After all, he said he felt threatened. And remember, it's on video that his car was struck, like right before it happened. He was threatened. It's not a big deal. It was just an accident. Let him go. No. There's no scenario where you can drive into people. It doesn't matter what you're feeling. If someone gets hurt, you're going to be found liable. That's going to happen. And since that time, there have been countless incidents, countless protests where you see these left-wingers going into the middle of the road and blocking everybody from police officers to ambulances to desperate people trying to get to the hospital or get to work or get back to their family. And there are going to be these confrontations. And what happens? Generally speaking, they're allowed to get away with it. But of course, you're going to have incidents, and a lot of people have been killed. I remember there was a big case a while back where for like 10 minutes, it was the biggest story in the country because some left winger was killed when they were blocking a road. And then it turned out that the driver was some immigrant. And so, of course, it just went down the memory hole and you never heard about it again. But there have been a lot of these cases. And going back to Charlottesville for a second, you may be saying, well, yeah, okay, it's a big deal if like a car runs into people, but a cop didn't open up and shoot him when he came in. Well, yeah, why wasn't a cop there? Because there was a cop there. There was a female officer. I'm not even sure she was a cop. She might have been like a school resource officer or something, but she abandoned her post because she was scared of all the protesters. That's why there was no control at that point. But if you had a cop who was there, yeah, they would have opened up on a car coming toward a crowd and nobody would have cared. Nobody would have said a thing. This whole case is just one bad faith experiment after another. And it's not just one activist here. It's not just this one mother who thought that defending these Somalis and whatever else was more important than being with their kids. If you look at Minneapolis itself, you have this huge network doing this kind of thing. It is basically an insurgency. Mayor Frey, he was being interviewed, I think, on Jen Psaki, and he said, well, I won't speak to the work that those have been organizing or doing right now. I won't speak to that. Yeah, he knows what's going on. He knows there's a huge effort, but he doesn't need to speak to it. The Minnesota Star Tribune did this bragging article called Inside the Organized Resistance to ICE in Minnesota. And I love it when they do these kinds of articles. It kind of reminds you after 2020 when they did, I think it was Politico, did the article where they were like, inside the great conspiracy to make sure Trump didn't steal the election, where it basically said all the conspiracy theories that the right wingers believed in were actually true. Well, here's another one. They're bragging about it. They tell you, like, this is what they are doing here. It's not organic. It's not citizens rising up. It's a far left effort that's heavily organized, that's heavily bankrolled, that's being organized by specific groups with names and addresses. And these reporters know exactly who they are. Just a quick excerpt here. The article begins by lionizing some of these activists and trying to get you to sympathize with them or whatever else. But then it goes on. It says, and I quote, it's an increasingly sophisticated effort buoyed by community nonprofits. And if we've learned one thing about these nonprofits, it's usually pretty lucrative to be a part of them, and we're probably paying for them. And if we're not paying for them, some wealthy company or some wealthy foundation is paying for them, offering trainings and lessons gleaned from Chicago, where ICE cracked down earlier this year. Protests are just part of it. The movement is also hiding immigrant families without permanent resident status from discovery, which is a crime, by the way, secretly ferrying immigrant children to and from school and delivering meals to families laying low at home. They stand guard outside mosques, collect cars abandoned after sudden arrests, locate people in immigration jail, and help get them attorneys. Local activists, elected officials, and community leaders say the feds are sweeping up people who pose no danger to society. But Department of Homeland Security Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin is adamant that its Minnesota operations are part of a mandate to arrest and deport criminal illegal aliens to make America safe. Those who are not here illegally and are not breaking other laws have nothing to fear, she said in the statement. And again, notice how the paper portrays this as like a radical thing. Oh, it's only justified if they're cracking down on like murderers and child molesters and whatever else. Now, of course, they are arresting these people, and it doesn't make a difference if those people are doing these things. You still get the protesters coming out. You still have the same people saying like, oh, this is fascism, this is authoritarianism. In fact, like the worse the criminal is, it seems the more eager they are to defend it. But if these people are here illegally, what's to discuss? The fact that there's a lot of them means that we can't get rid of them? What if we just don't feel like paying our taxes? Would it be separating me from my family if I just say, screw you, I'm just not going to pay my taxes this year? What if we all just don't pay our taxes? Are journalists going to be like, well, okay, we'll just let them go. It's not a real crime after all. It's just a mere civic offense. No, they'd be screaming for blood. A little later in this article, we learn in churches, of course, and school gymnasiums, direct action trainings, direct action, of course, being direct involvement with sabotaging property, attacking law enforcement. I mean, that's what direct action is. If you've ever hung around anarchists or Antifa or whatever else, are attracting hundreds of attendees each night. They teach people how to read judicial warrants and contribute to a repository of data for legal challenges by recording agents' conduct. Participants learn whistle codes for summoning crowds and receive links to rapid response clearinghouses. Comunidades Organizado El Poder y la Acción Latina, COPAL, launched its rapid response arm a year ago in response to President Donald Trump's reelection, seeded by a $1 million grant from the Bush Foundation. More than 10,000 people have registered for its training, said Edwin Torres de Santiago, manager of COPAL's Immigrant Defense Network. Other organizations are offering variations, unquote. So this is an organized effort. And by the way, COPAL gets federal funding. So where are these guys getting the money from? It's not just the Bush Foundation or whatever else. You're paying for it. And earlier in the year, there were all these wailing articles about, oh, government funding is endangering all these programs. What are we going to do? So when you think of what's happening right now, it's like that meme where you see the missiles being shot from one side and it says, this is my tax dollars. And then you see the missile defense coming from the other side and it says, somehow also my tax dollars. Yeah, it's the same thing here. You've got these ICE operations. You're paying for that, but you're also paying for the resistance to these ICE operations. And by the way, while I'm not sure about COPAL being funded in this, the GOP, which controls Congress right now, just put up its own budget request. They still want billions of dollars in funding to refugee resettlement programs this year. This is the GOP. This is the limited government conservatives. They have no problem spending money on this. This is what we're paying for. This is why we pay taxes, to invade our own country, to make our own lives worse. Contrast the public support of this effort to invade the United States, to defy federal law, to what we have faced on the right. Think of all the things we've had to put up with the last few years. Think of the standards. Think of just the ordinary frustrations like social media sites being taken down. Remember Parler, for example? And that wasn't the only one. Oh, we can't protect you against DDoS attacks. Oh, you can't be on the Apple Store. Oh, you can't have basic financial services. Oh, you can't be allowed to operate openly. You know why? You may not be calling for violence. You may not be calling for breaking the law, but someone on your platform is. Oh, you're going to ban that guy? Well, that's still not good enough because it's hinting at law breaking. It's hinting at disorder. That can't be allowed. This is about public safety. But if you are calling for openly defying federal law enforcement, you get federal funding. That's where we're at. That's real power right there. And it's only going to get worse in the years ahead. I mean, Democrats are already talking about charging Elon Musk with, I don't even know what they would charge him with. This is one of the things about politics now, the idea of calling for an investigation of something. We've sort of gone to the rule of law standards of like ancient kingdoms or something where it's just bring this guy up on charges. It doesn't matter what the charges are. We just know he's a political opponent. And yeah, that's going to happen to Elon Musk. It's going to happen to anybody of any substance who back Trump. And it's going to happen to all of us too. Doesn't even matter whether you back Trump or not. It's just if you're on the right. I certainly don't expect that Rumble will be able to do too much. And I certainly don't expect that X will be the same way. Probably be like European standards. But on Reddit, you can have open declarations. Oh, death to ICE. Fight back with lethal force. This is why we have the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is apparently to further a foreign invasion of your own country. ICE pigs, you reap what you sow. And again, this is something that already happened, right? We've already had violent attacks on ICE. We've already had violent attacks on ICE stations. Will Reddit be censored? Will people's bank accounts be seized? Will basic financial services be denied? No, never. Never, 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 never. And if you're looking for reputable institutions, for establishment institutions to kind of lower the temperature here, you're kidding yourself. The Minnesota Star Tribune has already doxxed the officer involved in the shooting yesterday. Now, I'm not going to give the name, but, look, I don't know why I bother. It's already out there. So I don't know how I'm trying to protect this guy. But keep in mind, what's the excuse for shutting down people's Twitter accounts and bank accounts and domain names and websites and podcasts and all the rest of it? It's because you're endangering people. You called a reporter a name. This makes her feel unsafe. Speech is violence. Violence is just speech, but speech is violence. You need to have yours taken away. But we can just dox this federal agent who all these people are screaming to have killed. And it's these same people who have no compunction about doing this, even in the midst of these protests, even in the midst of violent attacks against ICE officers, including not that long ago when this retarded left-winger somehow managed to shoot some detainees because he opened up on the vans instead of targeting the agents, but we all know who he was really going for. And nothing's going to happen to these people. What does that tell you about the real nature of power? And look at this posturing from the local politicians. The mayor of Minneapolis says ICE needs to get the fuck out. Ugh. Again, it's this, I hate my generation so much. It's this millennial coded, like, faux tough guy thing. Like, oh, I'm cursing. That means I'm really serious. I'm really strong. Well, this was the same guy that was weeping in front of George Floyd's coffin and kneeling before Black Lives Matter protesters in 2020 and dancing around waving a Somali flag. Sorry, I'm not impressed by this guy's moral courage and toughness. Tim Walz, not once but twice, has said that Minnesota is at war with the federal government, and then he invoked the Civil War again today. Now, of course, what was the Civil War about? If it was about anything, it was about the supremacy of the federal union over states' rights in the legal sense, but that's not really what it's about now, is it? It's like World War II. I mean, whatever World War II was about at the time, the people who fought it at the time had a very different understanding than what we're told today. I mean, now what is World War II really about? The cosmic meaning of World War II. It's about a fight against like racism and nationalism and patriotism and reaction or something like that. Same thing with the Civil War. It's about fighting racism and white supremacy and all this kind of vague stuff. And because more non-whites equals good, questions about the rule of law and federal control are basically just ignored. Like, this is where we're at. Now, the Supreme Court had a case a few weeks ago where it basically teed up Donald Trump to invoke the Insurrection Act. And what this would allow him to do is, he was recently told that he's not allowed to use the National Guard in all of these cities, but if he invokes the Insurrection Act, and some members of Congress are already saying this is what we need to do, he could actually start sending these people in. Now, today, Vice President J.D. Vance said, actually, what we're going to do is we're going to have this special prosecutor who's going to look into allegations of fraud. Obviously, Tim Walz has already been referred. I'm sure Gavin Newsom is probably, feeling some footsteps, and he's probably up next. And this seems to be the Trump administration's strategy. They're trying to soft pedal this, and they're backing ICE, but they're not being as militant about this as you might expect. And you still have this kind of soft pedal enforcement with other areas. You're not debanking the illegals. You're not imposing costs on the companies. You're not doing the stuff that would be away from the streets and from the headlines where you punish the business community. And probably the reason for that is because to some extent they need these people on their side. And I have a certain amount of sympathy here. I mean, this is the essential problem that the Trump administration faces. You're trying to break up a system of labor and law breaking that the economy has essentially become dependent on. And you have to do it in such a way where these capitalists who you're relying on to bankroll your reelection campaigns are not just going to turn on you or sink the economy. And these people are remarkably short-sighted. And as Lenin joked, they will sell you the rope on Friday. You have the revolution on Saturday. You hang them on Sunday. I mean, these people have no awareness of the kind of disaster that they're leading the country into with these demographic and immigration policies. So I understand why the Trump administration is being so hesitant in some ways, even as it's being very bold in others. But I think we're past this point, and this is kind of my final point here. Since the assassination of Charlie Kirk, I think all of us on the right have been kind of waiting for something to happen, right? And not just, oh, they rolled up this Antifa group. Oh, they're going after this. The FBI is being directed after this thing. Because if you look at the story of the last 5 years, you had these never-ending investigations. I mean, this is what Q was, right? QAnon and that whole thing. These never-ending investigations where some great conspiracy was going to be unveiled and the arch enemy was going to be revealed and everybody was going to get rolled up and then we would win something. And of course, it never quite happens. And it's very naive to think that it would happen that way. But now it really does seem like things are approaching a crisis where this can't just go on the way it has been. It's not just that they're killing us. And remember, Charlie Kirk was the moderate. Charlie Kirk was the guy who I called White Renegade of the Year in 2019 or whatever, basically white traitor. I mean, God knows I kind of regret that now. And certainly he came a long way since 2019. I mean, he was soft back then, but he wasn't by the end. But even at the end, even if you look at how some of the policies he was advocating would solve a lot of the problems we're dealing with, I mean, he was a moderate compared to you and I. And they killed him, and they still said he deserved it because of hate speech and whatever else. So when these same people are screaming about compassion and how we should feel bad, I'm sorry, but you've come to the wrong shop. Like, I'm fresh out of fucks to give. And I think a lot of us have felt this way for a very long time because now it's become an existential conflict. And when you have governors and when you have mayors, and when you have the local police department saying, we are just not going to enforce these laws. More than this, we are not going to help federal law enforcement if they come under attack. And we are going to regard this as something akin to a foreign invasion. Now we're talking about a real constitutional crisis. Maybe the Trump administration has a plan here. Maybe they're waiting for something to invoke the Insurrection Act. But it seems to me like that has to happen, because there is a point where trying to be diplomatic, trying to slow walk this stuff does more harm than good. And I think we've hit this point with the recent declarations from the mayor of Minneapolis, from the governor of Minnesota, from this low-scale insurrection that we're seeing with the attacks on ICE. And by the way, it's also going to be happening in Seattle. It's going to be happening in New York. It's going to be happening in Los Angeles. And eventually, the Trump administration is going to be overwhelmed by this popular movement. And it's not just a question of sending ICE into these cities. It's a question of breaking up these groups. Groups that are specifically dedicated to interfering with federal law enforcement cannot be allowed to exist if we are to have a country. RICO laws exist for a reason. You have to break them up. You have to seize the funding. You have to break up the networks. It's not just a question of Antifa. It's a question of groups that are openly declaring, we are here to destroy the United States, and we are going to claim federal funding in order to do it. And we're expected to believe that there's just nothing we can do about this. We're past the point where business as usual can solve our problems. And I think Charlie Kirk's death was one thing. The attack on the ICE station was another. Now, certainly with what's going on here, I think the Trump administration is being given opportunity after opportunity to take the necessary step. I'm not sure that the Insurrection Act has to be done right now, but I think we're about one more incident away from you have to do it. We're past the point where there's even a choice anymore. And then we start getting into real questions, because right now we all have our own ideas about politics, right? We all have our own ideas about who the enemy is and what's to be done and what kind of a system we really want, or whether it's a secession or American empire or this, that, and the other thing. But look, there are two sides in politics. There are just two sides. And right now the question is brutally simple. The United States, yes or no? Which is to say Western civilization, yes or no? Which is to say the white man, yes or no? Because the people who are mobilizing against it right now are not doing it from some third position, multipolar world. We're going to get to live in some new system. It's just gay race communism, South Africa, Zimbabwe. This is what we are facing. And this is a time for taking sides. Right now, the side that I want to win is the federal government side. Right now, what I want Trump to do is to go full Abraham Lincoln and give these General Sherman posters something to cry about by doing General Sherman type tactics in Minnesota, because that's what it's going to take. Because I promise you, if we don't get the kind of hard action that is required right now, we are going to see it in a few years, but it's going to be directed against us. And it's not going to matter what you think about Trump. It's not going to matter what you think about this program or that program, because to them, to the people who matter, to the people who aren't afraid to use power, we are all the same. And mostly it's because of the color of our skin, not our ideas. So thank you for joining me on this live stream today. I think we should have some questions by now, right? So I'm going to take a look at the StreamYard here. Then hopefully we've got some on Twitter too, right? Okay, great. Let's see what people have to say. Eventually we're going to have it so, people can do the submit questions and go to the top of the thing and whatever else. I just wish the right was able to do the same thing for our guys, not try to be principled, even when it's extremely detrimental. Yeah, I mean, this is the biggest thing. I've said before that the great thing about, or the worst thing I should say about the American right is it's always our principles forbid us from defending our interests. I mean, that's kind of a mantra of mine. But that's a lot of what it is. I mean, you see politicians on the right doing this now. I mean, this is what Mike Pence's new career seems to be. Just being like, oh, I'm going to give you some sanctimonious rhetoric about why we shouldn't do this. This is the same thing John Kasich is doing now, basically making this veiled comparison of Trump to Hitler a few days ago, or authoritarianism or whatever else. There's a lot of money to be made. And you're like, well, why are they doing this? Don't they understand that this is crippling them in the long run. Not really. I mean, if you say these kinds of things, you're going to get a good job. You're going to get to be a corporate lobbyist. You're going to get a chair at some foundation. I mean, somebody is giving Mike Pence a lot of money. Somebody is paying the salaries of all these people who are leaving the Heritage Foundation to join whatever stupid little gay thing he's setting up. Like, there is a living to be made here, and it's very easy, and you don't risk anything. And 9 times out of 10, people take the easy way out. And I don't really have an answer to it other than you basically have to drive these people out of the right. And unfortunately, that's a very slow and tedious process because it involves things like primaries and a lot of compromises and contested elections that you may not win, and these pitched battles over foundations and university chairs and all these other things that, unless you've like worked in the movement and live in Northern Virginia or something like that, I mean, I can tell you all sorts of stories about it, but you'd find it very boring because what does it matter to you? Well, unfortunately, in the long run, it does matter because these are the people who make the arguments and basically determine what people are and are not allowed to say. Yes, keep increasing the pressure. Now it's not time. What would it actually look like if the Insurrection Act was invoked? Okay, it's a good question. So the Supreme Court said they ruled against the president, basically saying you can't have these National Guard troops in these cities. Apparently, you're only allowed to use the army to desegregate schools or something. But I think it was the Chief Justice said, if he invokes this, that changes things. Now, there's certain statutory authority where if he invokes the Insurrection Act, you can say specifically that states and localities are not enforcing federal law. Obviously, the thing here is immigration. Now, what they were talking about before, when we were talking about, okay, we're going to send the National Guard into Chicago or Los Angeles or something like that, it was just because, oh, crime is high. And you can argue about whether crime really is high to justify this kind of thing. And there's a whole argument to be made about that. Is this just for optics or whatever else? Obviously, DC is kind of a different case because it's under federal control. Nobody really argued with the president's authority to have the troops in DC. But now you're talking about something different. Now, in this case, you're saying, look, the state, the locality, St. Paul, Minneapolis, they are not enforcing federal immigration law. More than that, they are not allowing federal officers to enforce immigration law. They're standing in the way of our duties. Here's a guy in the city council. I think he's the vice chairman of the city council, just appointed, was laughing on an interview about how the police department hung up on ICE agents who were basically saying we're coming under attack. So, like, you've got evidence right there being like, yeah, this is happening. And the Supreme Court more or less has a conservative majority right now. So this argument probably would fly. And I think this is where the administration is going to be forced to go. I think right now what they're counting on is that because they don't want to scare people more than they already have, they want the fraud thing to take out Walz. And it has already to some extent. I mean, he had to cancel his reelection bid. But what I think they want is that they think this is going to be the key weapon they can use in this state, in California, and all these other places. And I think it's going to be more intense than that. There's this argument about what's called a strategy of tension, where basically you deliberately try to increase social tensions to force a confrontation. And some have said, is the Trump administration trying to do this? Because you could deport more people quietly, right? So to speak, instead of, oh, look at these tough ICE guys and everybody's tactical and, they're coming and rappelling down or doing God knows what. We're sending 100 guys in to arrest one guy, and here's Kristi Noem like striding around and everything else. What you would do is you just kind of quietly round up people, ship them out, stay away from the headlines. You're doing bureaucratic reforms. You're finding businesses. You're doing all this kind of stuff. Would that not be more effective if you're just trying to increase the numbers? Probably would. But there are two arguments why you might want to be doing this. One is, of course, self-deportation, which is the critical thing. So you do need to put the fear of God into these people. The other thing, and this is where it gets a bit more conspiratorial, but now I'm beginning to wonder, if you do these sorts of operations, and if you get these kind of responses from far left groups, again, remember, they're already burning the American flag in the streets, and people are seeing that. I mean, there's your re-election ads right there, at least for the midterms or whatever else. Now you're getting to the point where do you get the casus belli to round up these groups, to break them up, to invoke the Insurrection Act, to bring up these guys on charges for defying federal authority? That may be a bit much. I mean, there's a lot of wish casting with this kind of thing. Like, why won't Trump do this? Why won't Trump do that? We've been saying this for a decade now. I feel kind of stupid sometimes saying it. But then you see something like this, and it's like things are like the pieces are kind of falling into place where if you were deliberately trying to do this, what would you do differently? And even if this is not the plan, like you don't get to have a vote. Sometimes you just respond to events, right? And the left fundamentally has way more power in their ability to organize than we do. I mean, this is why I'm very suspicious of people who say, like, well, we just need to build our own institutions and have our own movements and whatever else. Like, what movements? What institutions? Bring me the right-wing group that can assemble 5,000 people like that to show up to oppose a police mobilization and de-arrest people and get away with it and make sure that they all have legal representation. And, oh, by the way, are also getting taxpayer funding and support from all the local politicians. Like, do we have that? No? Okay. Well, if that's the case, then we're kind of stuck working through the state right now, aren't we? Now, do we need to get to that other point? Yeah, maybe we do. But I mean, that also means things like winning elections. That means doing a lot of organization building that is not particularly sexy and not particularly exciting, and it's very slow and frustrating and annoying, and maybe not the most exciting topic to talk about on a streaming program. But that is what we're going to have to do. It's not because I think we're incapable of it, but for one thing, they're getting taxpayer funding and we're not. They're getting funding from Soros and all these foundations. We're not. I mean, I can name you foundations that back in the 90s that used to give grants to a group like, say, VDARE, and they just cut it off because those people would rather give grants to something like an orchestra because they don't want to get in trouble. They don't want to be criticized by the media. They don't want to be called racist. How do you get around that program? That's a big problem. I mean, but that's not to say that things haven't moved in our direction in some ways. I mean, God, what has been more influential over the last few years than Elon Musk buying X? Congrats on the InfoWars appearance. Are you planning more with Harrison? Yeah, Harrison said he would wanted to have me on again, but that's up to them. So if they want me on, of course I'll do it. Need more exposure on the normosphere. Thank you. Appreciate it. The fact that the right doesn't organize the same way the left does kind of proves that they are fundamentally unserious political actors. Yes and no. I mean, there is a fundamental difference in personality type between the right and left. Like I've often spoken about how neurosis is actually a political advantage. And if you're right wing, your religion tends not to be politics. Your religion tends to be your religion. Your priority tends to be your career, it tends to be your family, it tends to be your God. You're the type of person who cares about the university sports program. You're the type of person who cares about the school play or something like that. I mean, you're not like watching MSNBC all day, like going completely crazy. And unfortunately, in a democracy, the people who drive themselves completely crazy over this stuff have the political advantage. The other thing is they just have more money. I mean, it's a hell of a thing when you're getting like $10 million a year from the taxpayer to set up your own foundation. Look, I mean, not for nothing, but one of the first jobs I ever had, with the Leadership Institute, my boss, Morton Blackwell, who I think is still on the board of the RNC, said political victory is determined by the number of effective activists on each side. And, our mission back then was to increase the number of effective activists on our side. Now, if you look at white advocacy, I would say that one of ours is worth 10 of theirs, maybe even 100 of theirs. The problem is there's 1,000 of them for every one of ours. And part of the reason is just because they have so many resources, because not just belief, but this ideology proliferates because a lot of people have something to gain from it. And if we had 1% of the funding that Black Lives Matter got in 2020 alone, yeah, we would have had the revolution by now. Like we would literally be living in Hyperborea as beings of pure energy and be functionally immortal. Like it would happen that quickly. But how does one accumulate that level of resources? How does one get that money from the taxpayers? I mean, these are separate questions. The police are against them in the cities where it really matters. There's a precedent for right-wing groups being swept up and its members swept up for self-defense going back to 2016. Yeah. I mean, if you look at the Rise Above movement, Rob Rundo, if you look at a lot of the people who got swept up with that, I mean, the FBI was pursuing him across the world for years. And I read the case files on that, the court filings. And the FBI was literally citing Antifa websites as like evidence. And the judge at the time, because there was this judge would like let him go, and then they would rearrest him again, and then the judge would be like, "What the hell? Let him go again?" And I think they might have gotten him for something eventually. I'll need to do a whole episode on just what happened to him. But at one point, the judge goes, "Why is it that you arrested this guy, but you didn't arrest the Antifa guys that they were brawling with?" And they didn't really have an answer for that. If you want to look, and I know people would always like joke about him, and it's not really a thing anymore, but what was Gavin McGinnis's group, Proud Boys, when they had that fight in New York City years and years and years and years ago. I mean, these guys were sent to jail for like a long time. I think it was like 10 years in some cases. And they brawled with these Antifa, and none of the Antifa were charged. Just didn't happen. So when you have these cities, depending on who's in control of local law enforcement, who's in the prosecutor's office or whatever else, I mean, yeah, if there's a conflict, you are in the terrifying situation where if you get attacked, because 9 times out of 10, I mean, these guys attack you, and you defend yourself, you are the one who's going to go to jail. And the other guys aren't even going to get charged. I mean, that is the tactical reality that we're in. That's also why if people are like, yeah, we're just going to go out and fight these guys, it's like, I mean, okay, you might win the fight, but depending on who the DA is in that area, you may go to jail for 30 years, and it'll be very slim consolation that you beat the crap out of somebody while you're in prison. Yarvin jacket, Corey. That was good. I've had this jacket for a very long time, so it's not from Curtis Yarvin, God knows. Although now I probably can never wear it again. Gerald Taylor, yourself said in the pod a while ago that in order to make any substantive change, the country would need to be brought to a crisis. Trump should have run stem walls and increase the pressure. Yeah. I mean, I'm at the point now where I think that we do need to, we are not in power, but we are not excluded from power as totally as some people might think. I'm not saying this to be self-important or whatever. Believe me, I'm not. I don't have any influence or something like that. But there are people, say, in the White House, in the State Department, and whatever, who watch the show, who read the columns, who read the website. I mean, hell, and this isn't even a big thing. I mean, Stephen Miller, right, was reading Ameren years ago, and that was like this giant controversy, the fact that he knew what American Renaissance was. So, like, yeah, I mean, we're not just screaming into the void the same way that I was in, say, 2010 or something like that. So, insofar as I would say anything, it does seem like the administration has sort of turned a corner with the new year. They're operating a bit better, a bit more seriously. They seem to have some creative solutions on how to appeal to the public. The poll numbers are going up. They're promising some certain payments to citizens in terms of the tariff refunds. I mean, we got to see what happens tomorrow with the Supreme Court ruling on tariffs, but if it goes a certain way, we might all be getting a check, which would obviously help. But fundamentally, you have power, and if you don't use all the power when you have it, it's just going to be used against you later. And I realize that like spits in the face of everything the American conservative movement has said for 60 years, but the American conservative movement was frankly a complete failure. So, I mean, who cares? Use it while you have it. And yeah, you got to force a crisis. And my God, I mean, they're walking into this when the governor is basically invoking the Civil War, when the mayor is saying ICE get out, when you've got people confronting law enforcement in this way. I mean, here it is. Like, this is it. And I mean, who knows what's like, as we're sitting here talking, there might be something happening right now. I mean, I guarantee this isn't going to be the last incident. Like, what if they start shooting ICE stations or something? That already happened. I'm going to start from the top here. She's been she being the victim here, the person who was killed. I'm not sure victim's the right word. She's been psychologically attacked since birth to hate her country. Yeah. The reaction from the right, even the crazy conservatards, has been a huge white pill. Yeah, absolutely. DeAnna's a Terminator. No, Kevin DeAnna's not a Terminator. He's just too lazy to put on a suit tonight. The politics of the left have been simply anti-white first and foremost for 6 decades, and the right is only now waking up to that. Tucker and Matt Walsh were finally admitting it a few days ago on YouTube. Yeah, they are. I mean, again, I've been a little critical of Tucker, and I still think he needs to have Jared Taylor on because he does this game where it's like, well, the left is anti-white, but it would be illegitimate for us to be pro-white. It's like, but why? I mean, you can maybe there's a debate to be had here. I mean, Sam Francis wrote decades ago, and I'm not half the writer Sam Francis was. Nobody is. But Sam Francis said decades ago something along the lines of, we are being attacked not as Christians, not as conservatives, not as Americans, not as whatever. We're being attacked as whites, and this struggle has to be met in racial terms. Now, you could say we are being attacked as white people, but it does not necessarily follow that we should respond as white people. I would disagree, but I'll acknowledge, sure, maybe we can have a discussion about that. But what I don't agree with is that it's somehow morally illegitimate to respond on racial terms when you are being attacked on racial terms, as I have been racially attacked my entire life, and so have you. So, I mean, that's why with Tucker, it's like, and it's like, no, it's not demons. It's not, some mysterious occult force. They just don't like white people. Like, you don't really need to overthink this too much. I think your death is tragic, but it's hard to feel sympathy for someone who went out of their way to impede law enforcement. Yeah, they've been doing this for a while, and it was only a matter of time. I mean, think of every situation you've seen. I mean, you've all seen the meme, right? Where the stick figures where the cop is confronting the black guy, and it's like, please do not resist. And the guy starts like moving around and pulls a gun out of somewhere. I mean, this is sort of think of every single thing we've seen with body cameras where they pull over a black guy and it's like, sir, would you step out of the car, please? And he just starts screaming or steps on the gas or pulls out a gun. It's like, well, yeah, okay, maybe it's a bad thing when people get killed, but what did you think was going to happen? Like, there's no scenario where you just get to impede law enforcement, defy commands, step on the gas, and the excuse is, well, she was trying to escape, so therefore it's okay. Like, what are we talking about here? And of course, these same people would laugh their ass off if you were killed, as they did when Charlie Kirk was assassinated. You have to admit that the left does a very good job of taking their own side. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. I guarantee they would be coming out if she had hit the officer. I guarantee they would be coming out of the woodwork to defend her. Yeah, that's absolutely right. James Field did the same thing at Charlottesville, except it wasn't fleeing from cops, but from an angry leftist mob. And he got 6 Gorillion lifetime sentences and universal slander from the media. True. I mean, like I said, there's a lot of that. That's a whole separate thing. There's some interesting books on Charlottesville. I wrote a report. I wrote an article on AmRen about a report from the city of Charlottesville itself, which I encourage you to read. It's called not the Fields report, the Heafy report. And this comes from the city of Charlottesville itself. They commissioned it. So this isn't like fringe source or like white supremacist, whatever. Like, they wrote it or they commissioned it, I guess. And some lawyer wrote it. And what you find is that the city of Charlottesville basically pushed for violence more or less explicitly so they would have an excuse to cancel the rally, which of course there was a permit for. Now, you can argue about a lot of things about, at the right. This guy screwed up. It shouldn't have happened at all. The optics were this problem or that problem, all these sorts of things. Fine. But one thing that I think everybody forgets, especially in context, is that it just never occurred to anybody that the government would deliberately push left-wingers and right-wingers together to cause a giant citywide brawl. That had just never happened before. I mean, it's not like this is the first protest in history where you had like right-wing extremists versus left-wing extremists. And so, yeah, like, of course there's going to be violence that spirals out of control. I mean, the police commissioner, I think, in Charlottesville had to resign soon afterward. So, there's a lot more going on there. I mean, at the very least, even if you're like, oh, he was 100% guilty and he deserved 419 years and this and that and the other thing, and the organizations were involved were all evil and all the marchers were evil and everything is the worst thing ever, fine. But one thing which just has to be conceded at this point is the reason there was violence is because the city of Charlottesville wanted there to be violence. That's just a fact. And even left-wingers will admit that at this point. When civilians and Antifa surround to drag out, the line is that anyone tries to escape is committing murder and deserves to be dragged out to the car and beaten to death. Well, this is the issue. I mean, you're seeing these sorts of protests all the time now where they block the roads, and it raises certain questions. There are some states where they've actually, I don't know if they've actually passed, but I know some state legislatures have, much to universal media condemnation, have actually proposed laws where if you're surrounded by protesters, you can just drive away. And if somebody gets hit, them's the brakes. But that's not something I would recommend, depending on what state you're in, because this is sort of how, when we think of like leftists using force. I mean, one of the tapes, for example, one of the clips from yesterday that you may have seen, for example, was you had this black guy trying to grab a gun away from an ICE agent. And it wasn't actually a gun. I think it was like a pepper spray gun or something like that. But he tried to grab, he may not have known that. He was trying to grab this gun. And he goes to grab it, and ICE agent, pulls away. And then immediately he does, I didn't, hands are up. You get shot in the face, which is rather amusing. And he walks away covered in, pepper spray or whatever it is. And what was the viral image? This black guy looking terrified with his hands up, with the ICE agent pointing the gun in his face and like, can't you believe the stormtroopers and look what's happening here? It's like, yeah, it's always this. I mean, the very first political right-wing conference I ever went to, I remember the Antifa were lined up at the door and they had like their hands in their pockets and they would just kind of like bump into you. So like accosting you as you go in. So they weren't like punching you. They weren't like bear hugging you, but they were, legally speaking, like assaulting you. But if you bump them back, they'll go flying across the road and, oh, I broke my shoulder. What's going on? How could you do this? Because it's all a media game, because they know the media is on their side. And certainly there have been enough videos. I think there was one with Jack Posobiec, of all people, where he's on the street corner in DC, where this Antifa comes up and like hits somebody he's with, or maybe even hits him. And a cop sees it, sees the whole thing, walks over, arrests the guy. And it's all on video. It just happened. The guy was just there. And they all just start lying immediately. Like, oh, Posobiec attacked us. We didn't do anything. This was self-defense. And it's like, it's all on video and we all just saw it. But I think what's truly terrifying about them is when they say even these obvious lies at this moment, they really believe what they're saying because they believe that fanatically in the ideology. And that's a tough thing to fight. We shouldn't be happy. She was a brainwashed woman used as a pawn by the left-wing political machine. They have her blood on their hands. Yes. In a proper society, she would have been with her family. Yes, agreed. They, being the left, reward their friends and punish their enemies. Politics 101. I just don't get how they continue to dupe normies with lies about equal treatment under the law and such. That's a big question, but I think a lot of it is because the alternative can be terrifying. I mean, I think this is why people retreated to conspiracy theories after Charlie Kirk was killed, because like what's easier to cope with? That some weird elite comprising his widow, Israel, Egypt, the conservative movement, and the Trump administration conspired to have him killed. And it's this weird thing that we'll never fully unpack, or that it was just some random tranny lover who did it, and a third of the country thought it was funny and would also think it's funny if you're killed. Like the latter is actually way more disturbing and harder to cope with. So don't worry, guys. This is the last time with this light. If the administration was serious, they would charge these mayors and governors who are resisting the federal government. Yeah, but we'll see what happens. I mean, I think they're trying to use the fraud thing now in lieu of that. And I have my doubts about whether that's going to be enough in the end. And San Jose police encouraged violence at a 2016 Trump rally. Yes, that's a very overlooked one. In a proper society, she wouldn't have had a wife either. Yeah, no kidding. I don't think we're on the hook for humanity left us anymore. Hearts of Iron event premise, maybe. Tucker is genuinely like 10 to 15 years behind what is the cutting edge of the right, maybe 5 years. And we'll just say the last one. Congrats on name face reveal on X. Seeing people using their real identity makes us all a little braver to do the same. Well, I mean, I've told that story before, like getting doxxed and whatever else. Yeah, if I could do it over again, I would have just done it for my own name from day one. But like, there was a reason why I was doing it at the time, right? And there weren't that many of us like 15 years ago. Like somebody had to work at LI and like organize these young conservatives and meet people and radicalize normal people into being psychopaths like me. And I needed to do it. And somebody also had to write for Radix and Countercurrents and everybody else, and only I could do that too. Now you have a bit more freedom. I mean, there's a lot more of us. And, like I've always said, just pick one path and go with it. The way I got doxxed was kind of a fluke too. And at this point, there probably wasn't anything I could have done to prevent it, really. Where, I mean, nobody could have predicted that. But now you pretty much have to count on being doxxed. Like it's gonna happen if you're involved in any sort of this thing. And there are arguments to be okay, like this is what I'm going to deal with. The consequences are simply not as bad as they were 5 years ago, though the consequences are still there. But if you say, well, I'm in a position where I can do more good if I remain a little bit aloof from these sorts of things, then you do that. I mean, people need to donate money. You're not going to get doxxed for donating money. People need to be working in normal companies and hiring other people and providing seed capital to people who are starting businesses and providing mentorship to younger guys who are coming up. Like these sorts of things are all important too. It's just, I don't think you can do multiple paths at once the way you once could. You can't lead like multiple lives the way I was with separate identities. And plus they get kind of hard to keep track of after a while, especially now where everything is online, because online actually is real life now. And you really can only have one brand. So I appreciate the compliment. And, I just wish I had done it from the beginning. So I think that about wraps it up. So yeah, I guess we are, right? I mean, that's basically how we're going to do it. We're going to do it Thursday at 7 going forward. And, eventually we'll do more and more of it. This is kind of a new thing for us, but eventually the more we do live, the more we do it, the more we're going to do it live. And eventually almost everything will be live. All right, guys, I appreciate you joining us. Let's see if things have kicked off in Minnesota any more than they already have. And I'll get you next time.